Hi, I'm Meta Spencer. Every now and then, I think it's important for me to sort of get caught up on what's going on with the whole world of disarmament. I talk about disarmament every week at least with somebody and some aspect of disarmament. But this is the season when all the disarmers are at their busiest. And coming up soon, we're going to have a lot of different meetings on different kinds of disarmament, different things that people disarm. And so I don't have an overview of that, but I always know where to go to get an overview. And that is with Erin Hunt, who's right on top of all things disarmament. Good morning, Erin. How are you?
Morning, Meta. I'm good, thanks. How are you doing? Well?
Doing great. Yeah, and I'm glad to see you in Victoria, BC now, because you've made your move from where your base is in Mines Action Canada in Ottawa, but you found that Zoom works very well and you can handle living where you prefer to live.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure my family is learning a lot more about disarmament than they ever thought they would, but yeah, it's been great.
Okay, I love the idea that some people just talk about it all the time. That really, if we'd all talk about it all the time, we might get somewhere. On the bus, in the coffee shop, to a hairdresser, just keep talking. I believe it. Okay, so what's going on? Mines Action Canada really does a whole bunch of things. The main focus has always been, I gather, on landmines, right? And that is your mission in life, but you managed to cover a lot of other things. Tell me all about it. How's everything going with Mines Action Canada, and what are you planning to do this fall?
Okay, well, so yeah, we got our name from landmines, not resource extraction, which is usually what people think when I'm introduced. But landmines, and from there, we've sort of realized that landmines were not the only indiscriminate and inhumane weapon being used. And we've co-founded campaigns on cluster munitions, which resulted in the Convention on Cluster Munitions, co-founded the campaign to stop killer robots, and we've been parts of networks on explosive weapons and on
what weapons?
Explosive weapons.
Explosive weapons, i.e. bombs.
Yeah, and that work is really focused on bombing and shelling of cities, because explosive weapons, well, the rules of war are supposed to be that you have to distinguish between civilian and military targets. However, what's been seen is that a lot of these explosive weapons, when we fight wars in cities like we do now, those bombs, even if they are hitting a military target, they're going to have reverberating impacts on civilian infrastructure. So one of the things that we hope will be happening this fall will be more discussions on a new political declaration to change policy and practice to try and limit those ongoing impacts on in populated areas.
Well, I excuse me for maybe being too blunt, but aren't you being already too circumspect in saying that it's sort of accidental? I mean, when you say if you hit a military target and it has civilian implications, that's true. But I can think of way too many cases in which the target was intentionally civilian, as in World War II, when all the cities in Germany were bombed, or in Japan, the firebombing of the major cities and so on. That wasn't even, they weren't even pretending that they were hitting military targets, were they?
No, they weren't. So that's something where
shouldn't those be considered illegal acts of illegal war?
Yeah, they already are. So under the Geneva Conventions from 1949, those explicit targeting of civilian objects and protected persons and things, that is already considered illegal under international humanitarian law. So it doesn't mean that everyone abide by it, but we have the law there already. So we do work on, reminding belligerent parties that, hospitals are not a target, schools are not a target. There's and all of that. But this is even like when states are doing what they are supposed to be doing. If you choose the wrong weapon, or where you choose something with a bigger blast radius than is actually necessary, or there's different policy and practice options to help not only abide by international law, but also protect civilians to a slightly higher standard. So that's sort of where we're looking on this issue. We want
I'm sorry to sound cynical and skeptical, but I would think that the problem isn't so much that they can't find the right size of weapon to use, but they're perfectly intending to do as much damage as they can, and they don't care.
I think it really depends on the actor.
Well, how often, what proportion of the civilian deaths in the world would you gauge or estimate were caused by sort of inadvertent side effects of attempting to bomb a military target, as opposed to the deliberate intention to bomb civilians? I just am pretty, pretty cynical.
Yeah, I don't have those numbers off the top of my head.
Exist.
There are people who are doing research on the impact of explosive weapons in populated areas. You can look at Action on Armed Violence, and there's a new explosive weapons monitor that's coming out from the International Network on Explosive Weapons. So you might be able to find some of the information there. But I think what we're looking at with this Irish-led political declaration process is trying to institute the changes that we saw, for example, ISAF and the AU mission in Somalia both made changes to their policies and sign-off levels for different weapons and that sort of thing, and they saw a dramatic decrease in civilian casualties. So we're trying to sort of take these case studies and ensure that these actions go wider, and that people start actually have a political commitment to do things like track casualties and all of provide victim assistance and that. Mm-hmm. So this is a case where, I mean, a lot of the people I work with, and I know you and a lot of people watching, really would love to see complete and total disarmament and an end to militarism and conflict. And yeah, sign me up. But what we're doing with this political declaration is trying to make steps in that direction and do what we can to protect civilians immediately. So it's a step in a long process, I think. And
let me play with this, my own jaded view. I think my guess is that what you're trying to do is a polite way of saying, cut it out, guys. But the implication is, it's sort of like you're saying, well, we think you probably didn't mean to be doing it, but let us just remind you that, maybe you could use smaller bombs and do less damage, because of course we know you wouldn't really intend to kill civilians. I'm sorry, but that's the only way I can think of it, because it just seems to me all these bombings are intentional, and it might be a nice way of sweet talking people into compliance, and I'll go along with it, sure, if you want. But yeah. I don't think these guys are ever intended to be limited. They go out deliberately killing civilians.
Well, I think, again, that really depends on the actor. And I know from people I know in the Canadian forces, most of them did not sign up to be bombing civilians. This is, you have to look at these issues as, most of the people engaging in a diplomatic process are going to be somewhat good faith actors. And otherwise, there's nothing, like, the option is do some things to make progress, or, take a very hard line and not be listened to.
Okay. So I'm sorry to push you, because you're absolutely right. In no way would I want to cast doubt over, in any public way, which is we're doing right now, on the good faith of the people you're trying to persuade, because that is undoubtedly the best way to do it. So, excuse me, you're right. Go ahead.
No problem. Yes, I know people have said, well, why don't you negotiate new law? And we know that the law is already there. So we're trying to just ensure strict adherence to the law and, preferably take steps beyond, because with any law, even our own laws nationally, the law is the bare minimum. Like, not murdering people and not assaulting people is sort of the bare minimum for
bare minimum,
good society. So we're trying to set a higher standard than the bare minimum.
But why don't you think that you would get maybe more results by prosecuting some guys who did, egregious violations? I mean, take some recent case of what seems to have been a deliberate bombing of civilians and bring it to, I don't know, the ICC or something. Has anybody thought of taking that more aggressive posture?
Oh, there have been some cases of going to, I'm thinking particularly the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, where you've seen these cases. But again, what we're working with here is diplomats and states, and changing state practice often takes more than prosecuting individuals who were at the time were probably not necessarily what we would consider state actors. So, I mean, that is a line of a line of work, and it's not something we work on, but it is something I know there's cases going forward about war crimes in Syria being prosecuted in different countries, and so that's all happening. What we're trying to do is
happening. Okay.
We're trying to set a higher standard.
Okay, I haven't heard of it. That'd be great. I would be enthusiastic in prosecuting some of these suckers. Anyway, you say that you mentioned Irish. Is it Ireland that is initiating this move, or what?
Ireland's leading the negotiation process on the political declaration.
Okay, so how is it being organized? This goes through this thing on conventional weapons, or what?
No, it's an outside process. So it's an Irish-led political declaration process outside of the existing treaty bodies on disarmament. So like Canada led an outside process to negotiate the landmines treaty, and Norway led an outside process to lead the Convention on Conventional Weapons, the Convention on Cluster Munitions. And then other countries led the Safe Schools Declaration on, protecting schools in armed conflict. The Irish are leading this particular political declaration process.
Okay. Well, I hadn't heard about it before. So are you going to have a meeting to try to get like-minded states together to promote this, or what?
Oh, the meetings have already started. They've been put on hold a little bit because of COVID. There were meetings the only meeting I've attended in human form was in November 2019. But there have been virtual meetings, including in March, on negotiating text and for this political declaration. And we're waiting for the next draft to come out, and hopefully there'll be some more discussions on that soon. I know the Irish would really prefer to finish the negotiations in person. Personally, I would love that because I've never been to Dublin. So I would love it if the Irish decided that we should go to Dublin to finish negotiations. But we'll see what the future holds for travel and in-person meetings, whether it's in Geneva or in Dublin. But if the Irish government is watching, Dublin, please.
Okay, so you have been attending quite a few virtual meetings or digital meetings or whatever, Zoom meetings. how does that go? I mean, I just love Zoom. I mean, I am having the best social life of my 90 years because every day I have a conversation with somebody like you now. And I just have it's more fun than I've ever had in conversations in real life, so to speak. But I have never been in a Zoom meeting that was actually trying to create a treaty or negotiate or something like that. And I wonder how you do it and how it's different from other.
Yeah, so there's been a few different ways that they've done this, and we've been doing diplomatic meetings to some extent, or some type of diplomatic meeting for about a year and a bit now, I think, virtually. Different treaties have been doing it in different ways. I mean, the UN General Assembly's first committee on disarmament and security, which is coming up in October, isn't allowing civil society in the room, but there will be one delegate per country in the room. And then there's options for watching on UN Web TV, I believe. They could change things in October, but that's what I think is happening. We've had other meetings where they've had everybody in a platform called Interpretify, which allows for the interpretation you would have if you were in the UN into the 6 UN languages. You pick your language. My favorite meeting of this type of formats have been the Mind Ban Treaty, the Ottawa Treaty meetings. The intersessional meetings have often allowed everyone to be on the platform. And in one of them, we had a chat as well. So you could put messages in the chat to everyone in the plenary while people were talking, which was really interesting and allowed you to put some of those things that you would normally say over, like when you run into somebody at the coffee machine, to everyone instead of just whoever was at the coffee machine when you were there. And it also evolved a lot of like, good evening from Japan, like good afternoon from, like, the pleasantries that help move things along.
Oh, I don't know about that. I'm very ambivalent, or not just ambivalent, more negative than positive about those things. When I have a Zoom meeting and people start typing things into the chat, I want to slap them. Boy, that it annoys me because I can't do two things at once. I can't read and listen, so I've got to do one or the other. And you just bother me by putting up these side messages that grab my attention. So I'm on a different wavelength from you if you think you like those intrusions.
Yeah, well, it gives you an opportunity to build community, which is what really helps in moving things along. It's those relationships. And it's really hard to develop one-on-one relationships when you're always in a 300-person meeting. So even things like
when you're in a real meeting, you don't go off in the corner and whisper to each other. You shut up and you have a coffee break. And then you
No, no, we talk to people all the time. I always am tapping diplomats on the shoulder and saying, really? Like, can you come talk to me right now? Or like, that was very interesting. Here's resources, like, oh, here's some language we're hoping you'll include in your statements for the next session. That's a huge part of my job at diplomatic meetings. So having the chat
I'd
function,
like you if you if you did that to me when I'm trying to listen, I would say, beat it, kid.
Yeah, well, you get used to it pretty quick because that's how, like, other governments will shoulder tap, civil society will shoulder tap. So that's one thing that's really challenging about entirely virtual diplomatic meetings is that we don't get that ability to pull people aside, to have side chats, to share language as easily. You have to like email somebody, and not everyone checks their email all the time.
Well, there could be, I would think there could be something equivalent to the coffee break, because I noticed there's a huge difference between what people say officially when they're on the record and being observed and notes are taken about what they actually said, as opposed to what they say and do when you're just informally stopping for break. So why don't you have coffee breaks, during the session?
I mean, we would, but if everyone's working from their office or from home, they need those coffee breaks to actually go and make their coffee or go and, use the washroom or have a health break. So having the ability to interact during the meeting is really important. I've done some work with colleagues from across the disarmament community on sort of do's and don'ts for good diplomatic meetings. One of the big things that we've seen that's really good with doing all of these virtual meetings is if it allows wider participation. A lot of the time, who can participate in a meeting is really dictated by who has money or who can be sponsored and who can get a visa. With virtual meetings, you don't need a visa. You need good bandwidth, which is a massive problem for a lot of our colleagues. But I mean, it eliminates a large number of costs, so more people can participate without, having to worry about visas and flights and hotels and as much money. So
Yeah,
that's been really good.
I can really appreciate that. That must be a big asset. But now you can answer a question that I've never had to put before, and that is, of the different countries, what proportion of them are inhibited or impaired in their ability to participate because of poor bandwidth or difficulty of making and sustaining connections on the Wi-Fi connections, etc. I've been trying for 6 months to set up a talk show with a woman in Peru, but every time we try, there's a problem. The connection is just not adequate. Now, I don't try that. I do try a number of different countries, but I by no means have any sample of all the world's countries to know how much that's a problem. How widely would you say there are difficulties about just technical connectivity that inhibit people's participation?
I mean, it's pretty widespread, but there's a lot of differences there. So if you're looking at governments and diplomatic representation, most people still have missions in Geneva and New York, and sometimes people were sent home for a while, but most people are back in their missions. So then they have, Swiss or the US level of connections. Although weirdly, I have noticed a lot of American diplomats have very bad connections. So I don't know what's going on around Washington, DC. But then when we're looking at civil society, it really depends on a few things. It's one, the country, but it's also rural versus urban. Mm-hmm. So is it someone who lives in the capital? And are they able to access, are they from a big NGO that has strong connections, or are they a small grassroots organization in the capital that might have slightly better connection, or are they a landmine survivor network from the countryside? All of those will really depend on the network access. And then there's the cost. So being able to have enough data on your smartphone to attend 4 hours of diplomatic meetings can be quite costly, especially for youth. The youth we work with trying to participate in things, we ended up actually providing data grants to youth who needed them, where we would send them the money they need to buy the data minutes to participate. And sometimes they'd be able to get in and sometimes they wouldn't, but at least then they have the access, the ability to try.
Yeah, I guess, come to think of it, my own experience is sort of compatible with what you said, because there are people I know who occupy, they have what I would have thought would be very adequate computers and so on, but they have problems all the time. So even here in the city, it's true. It's true. It's not just whether they live in a poor country, but something else. You never know. Okay, well that's informative, but it certainly does seem to suggest that probably more different nations could be represented on a Zoom call than might be in a face-to-face conference. Is that generally true?
I think it often still comes down to size of mission and human capacity. Because a lot of the small missions, just because everything's gone virtual or gone hybrid, where they have like 1 or 2 people in the room and everybody else online. If you only have 2 staff in your mission, you still only have 2 people, no matter how many, like you might not have to physically run from one end of the UN to the other to get to different meetings, but you still can't necessarily be in 2 virtual meetings at once. So from a state perspective, there's a few other factors there. You can, though, occasionally we see people that I haven't seen in a while, like countries I don't often see in the room. I have seen in a few diplomatic meetings online, but again, that could just be a case of they manage it fit in their schedule along with all their other things, that if it was in person or if it was virtual, there was just the hole in the schedule that fit. So I don't really know exactly how the scheduling versus, format fits into that.
The thing I'm wondering is, you've been in this game for several years now, 10 years or so, haven't you?
About that, yeah.
Yeah. And so by now, I just wonder, do you have an international network of friends that that you just run and hug each other when you see, or do they send a different mix of people all the time so that you don't know half or 3/4 of the people in any given meeting? What happens? Is it an old home week, or is it getting acquainted for the first time week?
It's both. So civil society is a lot more static. So yes, we have very good working relationships, very good friendships. People come and go, yes, but we're a bit more static. Diplomats rotate, depending on the country, on average every 2 to 4 years. So you develop a relationship and like very friendly relationships and everything, but then they might get rotated out. I know a diplomat we've been working with for a few years. I just saw in an email that he's rotating out this week or next. So I won't get to say goodbye because, well, everything's virtual now. I'm not in Europe. But yeah, so he'll be replaced. And then we'll, be like, well, I used to work with your predecessor a lot. I'm Erin. This is what we do, blah, blah, blah. And build it again. But yeah, we do see a lot of the same people, but there is the diplomatic rotation, and also there's some NGO turnover, but I feel like the NGOs are a little bit more static. Okay,
now you represent the NGOs, and what is the relationship between the official delegates of the country, who are supposed to be the ones actually making decisions, right? As opposed to you folks who do all the shoulder tapping on on those guys, right?
Yeah.
I used to think, when I had a little more contact with the UN, that 30 years ago, the official diplomats really were annoyed by the presence of all of the civil society people hanging around and trying to get their attention. And yet I thought that I don't know why I think this, but I think there was some reason to believe that there was kind of a shift, so that it became more normal and expected and proper for the diplomats to appreciate the contributions and welcome interventions by civil society hangers on. I don't know, is that true? That I'm thinking about the UN now, but the same question would apply to any of these, outside of the New York base, but places in Geneva and other places where you've got be holding meetings, as Dublin will be. To what extent do they appreciate your presence as opposed to feeling annoyed that you're just getting in the way?
Well, I think it depends on the country. There are definitely a couple of countries that do not like civil society, probably because they don't have their own domestic civil society, or they try to oppress their own domestic civil society. But I believe you're pretty accurate in your assessment. From before I came into this line of work after the Ottawa Treaty, which was a massive shift in diplomacy because of the close partnership between the states and civil society. So civil society had a seat at the table in the negotiations, and we were sort of expected to be there. And that has really moved forward through most of the disarmament work that I see, whether we're meeting at the First Committee in New York or any of the UN treaty bodies in Geneva, except for the Conference on Disarmament. They're a little bit stuck in the past. But every other treaty body we work in, I think we are recognized for the value that's provided by civil society in terms of expertise, because don't forget, a lot of diplomats cover a lot of files. So people that work on disarmament might also be working on human rights, or they were working on trade before and now they're on disarmament. Whereas I've been working on disarmament for over 10 years. So we've got expertise, we have different perspectives, and we can provide support to positions and things when necessary. If someone proposes something that, we think is good, then you get, support there. We're able to sort of talk things through and suggest language and really shift things when needed. But don't get me wrong, there's still countries that would like us out of the room. But our champion countries often will speak up when they try and get us out of the room. And that's what we really want to see.
They defend you. You've got pals who will stick up for you. Okay, yeah. That's good to know. But even, I mean, we can think of countries that you might want to say are good countries, but who I would bet almost every one of the civil society people in the room would be more progressive than those countries. I mean, let's call it as we find it, which is Canada to be one of them. Canada is absolutely not a great leader in disarmament movements at all, even though, they'd like to think that they are on the side of the angels. And so do you find it hard to lobby or, tap on the shoulders of our own officials, for example, or those of, friendly countries that maybe some of the countries belong to NATO and feel they can't move anything like as far and as fast as you would want them to, right?
Yeah, I mean, as a Canadian, it's immensely frustrating to see the rhetoric that our government uses and but the lack of action that they take internationally. Immensely frustrating. But that doesn't mean it's not possible to work with Canadians. I enjoy working with a lot of the Canadian diplomats on this file. My job is, I heard it once referred to as, your friendly critics. As you push people to be better, bring them up to a higher standard instead of the danger that comes with negotiating down to the lowest level. we're always trying to pull them up, whether it's Canada or whether it's literally any country, pull them up to the highest level.
So if you meet these people out of the context of the room, do you feel that many of them really have their hearts where yours are, your hearts, unless if you have multiple hearts, where you are, or are they in their own minds comfortable with the position that the government requires them to take? I guess I want to say, if they had their druthers, would many of the diplomats go along with your wishes or not?
I don't think I should answer that publicly, but I'll just say that I think there's a large variety of personal opinions in any diplomatic space.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough. That's a reasonable thing. Okay, now I've deflected you a lot, but this is all very interesting to me because it's sort of like looking behind the curtains at things that I don't have a chance to go behind the curtains and see what goes on in these things. So let's go back to the more general question of what are the disarmament issues coming up? Well, of course, we have an election now. And to what extent do you have any hope of getting any impact on government policy by trying to speak up in, let's say, all candidates meetings or other political public events having to do with the election? Are you engaged in trying to make an impact that way, or mostly you're just worried about getting off to Geneva when you can?
Oh, no, we're not doing active partisan lobbying. That's not our role. We have sent a survey to all the political parties about their positions on a variety of disarmament issues. So far, the Bloc is the only one who's responded. Later today, the political parties will be getting a reminder email. So we're trying to provide information for voters who care about disarmament of where their parties stand. And that is available on our website already at mindsactioncanada.org/ I believe it's vote 2021. But if it's 2021 vote, please don't get upset with me. But it is the most recent posting under what's new on our website. There's questions there that you could ask. Well, when people door knock. But one of the things that's really, really good about a lot of the issues we work on, whether it's landmines or cluster munitions, is we have all party support for things like Canadian funding for mine action. Almost every parliamentarian I've ever spoken with would like Canada to be doing more on this topic. So our big concern is making sure that the new parliament members in the new parliament agree and that they're able to use their role as parliamentarians to push the government along. So we had all party support for Canada joining the Convention on Cluster Munitions. So what we're really looking for here is to remind the parties how important this is. I know the leaders' debates haven't included much on foreign policy, which is very disappointing. But this is something that we're going to make sure we can keep an eye on everyone's platforms, and we'll see how the election cookie crumbles, and then we'll get back to reminding parliamentarians of Canada's history and the importance of Canada being a leader on this issue.
I know when people call me now, are you going to vote Liberal or PC or what are you going to vote? And they want me to say whatever they want me to say, and I say nope. I'm not going to vote for you because you haven't supported the ban treaty. And of course, I probably will vote for one of them because I don't have that much there's not a lot of variety to choose among. So, but it's my only moment of vengeance when I can take it out on these poor guys who are having to call and trying to line me up for a good vote. Anyway, there we go. Go back to our topic of the more general projects or meetings and diplomatic efforts that are coming up this fall.
Yeah, so we call it the busy season, disarmament season. Trying to make it sound like something from Jane Austen, where everyone goes to town for the season. This is much less glamorous. And the goal is not find a husband. The goal is, make progress towards disarmament. So we have things going starting on the 20th. Actually, last week was the Arms Trade Treaty meeting, but that's in the past. So September 20th.
Give me a little report on, was there something interesting that happened there?
It's actually the only major treaty in disarmament that I don't work on. So unfortunately, I didn't put it on my list when I was writing down what was happening.
I'll get in touch with the Project Plowshares people because I think they're on top of that one.
Yeah, that's one of their specialties. So definitely, talk to Plowshares. They'll be able to give you the full 411 on that. But yeah, we have the second half of the review conference on the Convention on Cluster Munitions, which is starting on September 20th and 21st. What we're looking for on that one is they're working on some language about condemning use of cluster munitions. And Canada is at the moment opposed to language that says they condemn all use under any circumstances. They tell us the reasons why, but I still do not understand why a weapon that Canada cannot condemn any use under any circumstances of a weapon we've categorically banned. But putting that aside.
Well, wouldn't it just simply be that you might have to criticize your allies and people that you like to play with in other contexts?
The only, almost all of NATO is part of the treaty. And most of those states are okay with this. So it's just a special little Canadian, Australian, UK little situation.
Well, what about the US?
They're not a member of the treaty, so they don't have a say on this.
So that's probably why.
Yeah, it is why, but it's not a valid justification because, I mean, if you can't tell your friends when they screw up, like, who can you tell? Like, a good friend is the one that's like, listen, like, that outfit does not work for you.
That's not the way most people think, Erin, and you know it. You only criticize your enemies and you stick by your friends no matter what horrible things they do. You see, today I'm in a bad mood or something because I criticize everything you say. Go on.
Well, that's fine. No, so it's not a U.S. allies only position. It is literally a UK, Australia, Canada only position. So that is, and we've not had a problem criticizing the US on a number of other things. So it's really just this one little thing. And the US don't use cluster munitions anyways, so it's sort of a moot point. But the following week, we have a meeting on autonomous weapons that's going to take place with one person per delegation in Geneva, and the rest of us watching online. We won't be able to engage online, which is unfortunate, but we can at least monitor the proceedings virtually. All of October is going to be the first committee of the UN General Assembly meeting in New York about security and disarmament. So we're hoping to see some strong resolutions in support of the nuclear ban treaty, some good language on sort of gender disarmament, strong resolutions in support of the mine ban treaty and the Convention on Cluster Munitions, and just sort of some progress being made diplomatically there. November, we have the 19th meeting of states parties of the Mine Ban Treaty. Yes, the Mine Ban Treaty has been going for over 20 years now. And that is currently scheduled to happen in The Hague, Netherlands. And we'll find out in a couple of weeks whether that's an in-person meeting or a virtual meeting.
Tell me what would be controversial, or what kinds of issues are people still bringing in these meetings on landmines?
Well, what we're really geared towards right now is the 2025 goal. So in 2014, states parties set a goal of completing, finishing the job on landmines by 2025. In a lot of countries, that is doable. We've seen huge progress in clearance. Obviously, you don't finish the job on victim assistance, but you can set up strong systems and make sure that everyone has access to all the survivors and victims have access to those. So the big thing right now is this push to 2025 to get as many countries clear of mines as possible by 2025. We know there's a couple countries that won't make that deadline, but there's a bunch that can, and some of them are very much on track. And some of them, if they had a little bit more funding support, we could get there. So it's all about ensuring we have the political will and the funding to get to 2025, and then continue on to help the final countries finish the job.
Are there any countries that are adding to the landmines? I mean, installing them as opposed to just not taking them out as fast as you'd like.
There's only one government has been using landmines recently, and that's Myanmar. There are non-state armed groups in a number of countries that have been using mines, and in many cases making their own mines. But the only country left that's using mines is Myanmar.
Horrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, go on. Okay, so now at the general, the first committee, that's the biggie, right? This goes on a whole month and has a lot of dimensions to it. Am I right?
Yeah, it's where they talk about all the disarmament issues, whether it's smaller and small light weapons, or landmines, or nuclear weapons, biological weapons, chemical weapons, depleted uranium, like a lot of different things come up in there. It's big and important. And it'll be interesting to see how it goes this year. Last year was definitely a massively scaled down version because of COVID and the inability for them to meet in person. This year, we're still not 100% certain on how things are going to look for first committee. So it's going to be really hard to know until October what it's going to turn out like.
Tell me, what's the current status of the setup for the NPT review?
NPT review conference is currently scheduled for January. The exact dates have flown my mind, but it's 4 weeks. So I think we can just say January, except for New Year's Day. I think it starts on the 3rd or the 4th and runs till pretty much the end of the month. Big questions for that are going to be who is able to travel. The vaccine inequality around the world is a massive, massive problem for the diplomatic community. And I'm not sure that people are dealing with it and noticing it as as big a problem as they probably should. So we don't know who's going to be able to travel. It's supposed to be in New York. And we also don't know whether civil society will be able to participate because they haven't been able to be in the UN building in New York in quite a while. So it's sort of, as far as I know, the schedule and everything is set up for January and program of work as usual. But what that actually ends up looking like, we'll really have to see how things go with vaccinations
How many
around the
times
world.
have they deferred this thing? How many? There's I can think of twice at least that they postponed it. That
Yeah.
NPC.
Yes, it's been postponed from most of 2020. It was supposed to be in 2020, I believe in May. So was postponed until the end of the year. And then it was postponed until August this year, and now it's postponed again until January. So it's been postponed quite a few times. But this is one that the president and many states parties really believe needs to be held in person. So doing it virtually or doing it as a hybrid meeting is probably just not going to work. So they have to hold off until they can do it in person.
No, I hadn't really reached very optimistic impressions about what good results one can expect anyway. I mean, do you want to speak to that? I don't know. All I'm reacting to are sort of vibes, not any specific information. But do you have any specific information that would inform a person trying to guess what might be expectable?
I'd be going off vibes as well. My focus for early 2022 is the first review or the first meeting of states parties of the nuclear ban treaty, which is going to be in March in Austria. That's what I'm focusing on. That's where I think there's going to be progress and good things being done.
At the ban treaty conference.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what I'm focused on.
What do you expect will happen there that you're optimistic about?
Well, that's the first meeting of states parties. So this is going to set the groundwork for how this treaty is implemented going forward. Mm-hmm. So we're really looking to make sure there's going to be, good rules of procedure, which sounds super nerdy, but it's important to have good rules of procedure adopted. Mm-hmm. They're going to come up with an action plan, I believe, for setting what states should be doing for the next 5 years on this treaty. Coming from our background as part of the positive obligations team at Mines Action Canada, where we brought a lot of our background information from the Mine Ban Treaty and the Convention on Cluster Munitions about how to support victims and survivors of indiscriminate weapons. We brought a lot of that into the negotiations and saw a lot of that language adopted. So now we want to be looking at, how do we make the words in that treaty a reality for the affected communities around the world? So, I mean, that's really exciting to me. That's a way that this treaty is going to have mm-hmm. direct impact on people's lives. Mm-hmm. So making sure that we get that right.
Okay, what do you consider right? What, if you're the strategist of how to best promote the adoption of the ban treaty, what would you be promoting?
Listen to affected communities. They're the experts in how nuclear weapons have impacted them, how it's impeded their ability to access their human rights on an equal basis to others in their country or in their region. And they know what they need.
I actually misheard you. Listen to the something community, and I didn't get that
affected
word.
Communities.
Affected. Okay.
So listen to affected communities. Well, they're the communities that live in places where nuclear weapons have been used or tested. So these are communities, for example, in the Marshall Islands, whose land was used for nuclear weapons testing. There's communities in Australia, communities in the southwestern US, communities in Algeria and Kazakhstan, in a number of other countries in the Pacific. Listen to the affected communities. And that's how we're going to get this right.
Oh boy, I argue everything you've said. I give you trouble today. I'm sorry. But, to me, I wish that we could listen to the people who have a stake in the damn things, people whose jobs depend on creating components for nuclear weapons or delivery systems or, whatever. That I think the affected people have no power. The people who have the power to make decisions are the people who can vote for people in Congress who are going to make sure that there's an operation, a plant, a factory or something in their state that keeps some interest and motivation for people to continue building the thing. So, I don't want to disagree with you, but I don't know whether I think that the Marshallese, who are probably the most horribly personally affected of any population in the world directly from testing and so on. I can't think of any other population that has undergone the kinds of horrors they have, but I don't think they have any influence whatever.
Well, a few things on that. First of all, you asked me how to get victim assistance right. And getting victim assistance right is you have to listen to the people who you're trying to benefit.
Okay.
And second of all, the reason that those communities are so heavily affected is because they were not listened to and because they had no power. So I don't see that continuing to disregard their voices and their opinions, and they're continuing to minimize the power that they have as an effective way to make change. And then finally, we are, as ICANN and nuclear weapons campaigners are working with financial institutions and civil society and even local governments and all these sort of things to pull away the financial backing for nuclear weapons through the Don't Bank on the Bomb work.
Okay.
So that's all being done. But I think for far too long, when it comes to nuclear weapons, the default has been to listen to the powerful states, the nuclear armed states, the military industrial complex. And that forgets that everybody has a say in the weapons that destroy humanity. And as civil society and as people looking to upend these structures, we can't sort of play into the existing power dynamics. So we really do have to take effort to sort of undo all of this nuclear colonialism that has shaped the debate thus far.
Erin, you're absolutely morally, unquestionably right. Bless you. and I'm really hoping that whatever strategy prevails is one that wins the day and makes some progress. So, and I was just so glad to have a chance to chat with you today.
Thanks for having me.
I've been arguing every bit of the way. I don't know why, just in a bad mood, but I don't. Certainly, I appreciate, absolutely appreciate what you're doing. It's really important, and I thank you very, very much for all the work that you do and the contributions to ending all the weaponry that we have on this miserable planet.
Well, thanks for having me.
Okay, you have a great day, dear. Okay.
You too. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye.